Amy
everybody to
Slaton
poke fun
had
at me and
always
make fun of me
believed
and
that
say,
if you opened your life to the world would eventually understand
the
you.
wrong one talking
For
crazy
years,
to me because
fans watched her laugh, struggle, cry, and celebrate on reality television. They believed they knew her. They believed they understood her heart. But there were moments cameras never captured, moments too quiet, too painful, too personal to share, until one cold afternoon when Amy decided she could no longer keep everything inside. That day, Amy posted a simple photo online. Her young son sat on the floor, smiling wide, clutching his favorite toy. Behind him stood her fiancé, Brian Scott Levorn. To anyone scrolling past, it looked like a normal family moment. Warm, safe, loving. But the caption told a very different story. Amy wrote words that stunned everyone who read them. She said Brian loved her son in front of people, showed affection when others were watching, but deep down, she felt he hated her child. The honesty in that statement hit like a punch to the chest. Fans were confused. Brian had always appeared kind and supportive. He stood beside Amy through public scrutiny, family drama, and emotional breakdowns. He smiled for photos. He played the role of a devoted partner. So how could something so dark exist beneath the surface? What Amy hadn't shared before was that the tension hadn't come out of nowhere. It had been growing quietly for months, hiding in moments most people would overlook. She noticed how Brian would pull back when her son asked for attention. How his patience thinned faster with the child than with anyone else. How his smile sometimes felt forced, like a mask he forgot to remove. Amy tried to ignore it. She told herself she was overthinking. She loved Brian, and love makes you want to believe the best. But a mother's instincts are loud, and hers wouldn't stay quiet anymore. When the post went live, Brian saw it almost immediately. The words burned. He felt exposed, ashamed, and deeply guilty. He had never intended to hurt Amy or her son. In his mind, he was overwhelmed, insecure, unsure of how to step fully into the role of a father figure. Instead of communicating those fears, he withdrew. Seeing Amy's pain laid bare for the world forced him to confront something he had been avoiding, the damage his silence and distance had caused. That evening, the three of them sat together in the living room. The house felt heavy. Amy's son played quietly on the floor, sensing tension he couldn't understand. Brian sat stiffly on the couch, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet, his voice shaking as he spoke. He admitted he never meant to make Amy feel that way. He confessed that fear had made him pull away instead of stepping up. He acknowledged that his actions hurt both Amy and her child. Amy listened, torn between relief and sadness. Relief that he was finally telling the truth. Sadness that it had taken so long. She reminded him gently that love wasn't about words spoken in public. It was about showing up consistently, especially when things were hard. Families, she said, were built on effort, not appearances. In the weeks that followed, Brian tried to change. Not with grand gestures, but with small, steady actions. He built Lego castles on the floor. He read bedtime stories, even when he was tired. He learned how to make pancakes, flipping them dramatically just to hear Amy's son laugh. Slowly, the boy warmed to him. Trust grew where tension once lived. Amy watched from a distance, hopeful but cautious, understanding that healing wasn't instant, but it was possible. As fans followed these moments online, they saw a side of Amy they hadn't seen before. Vulnerable, honest, brave enough to admit that love could be complicated. Many praised her for speaking up. Others respected Brian for acknowledging his faults and trying to do better. For Amy, the noise faded. What mattered most was the peace she began to feel at home, in the quiet moments when her son slept and Brian held her hand, both of them trying to be better than they were yesterday. While Amy navigated family healing, another shift was happening just down the hall. Tammy Slaton's morning began differently than usual. There were no doctor appointments or tense conversations about numbers on a scale. Instead, the kitchen filled with sunlight and laughter. Standing beside Tammy was her new home nurse, Carla, a woman known for her calm voice and surprisingly good sense of humor. Carla tied on a bright green apron and called Tammy chef. with a grin. Tammy laughed, rolling her eyes, already skeptical. Healthy food, in her mind, usually meant disappointment. But Carla had a plan. They were making a comfort bowl, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and a yogurt herb sauce. Tammy joked her way through the process, but something unexpected happened as they cooked. She listened. She asked questions. She learned why food mattered, not just what to avoid. Chopping vegetables felt empowering. Watching chicken sizzle filled the room with a smell that made Tammy smile instead of crave guilt. When she tasted the sauce and realized it was actually good, she stared in disbelief. For the first time in a long while, the kitchen didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like progress. When they finally sat down to eat, Tammy took her first bite slowly, savoring it. She admitted they might be onto something. Amy, watching nearby, teased her, but she was proud. That sense of progress followed them into another milestone, Gage's first birthday. Amy decorated the house with balloons and banners, hardly believing a year had passed. The cake was dinosaur-themed, just the way her son loved it. Family and friends filled the house with noise and laughter. Tammy arrived with a gift nearly as big as the birthday boy himself, a giant stuffed dinosaur that immediately became Gage's new favorite. There were games, music, bubbles, and messy cake moments that ended with frosting everywhere. Laughter echoed through the house. Later, when the guests left and the noise settled, Amy sat on the couch holding her sleepy son. Tammy sat beside her and quietly acknowledged that despite all the chaos, days like this mattered. Loud, messy, imperfect, but meaningful. What fans didn't realize was that even during these joyful moments, there were countless unseen chapters unfolding beyond the cameras. From private promises and late-night talks to fears about change and identity, the sisters were building something deeper than what aired on television. The story wasn't just about weight loss. It was about resilience, growth, and learning how to keep going even when the path felt uncertain. What viewers never saw was how much of the sisters' journey happened when the cameras weren't rolling. While the show captured weigh-ins, appointments, and tense conversations, the real transformation was happening quietly, in moments no one thought to film. Moments that didn't look dramatic enough for television, but mattered more than any episode ever could. On one of the very first days of filming that season, Amy and Tammy arrived earlier than scheduled. The studio lights were still being adjusted, producers shuffled paperwork, and the energy felt unfinished. Amy carried a small notebook covered in bright stickers. It looked playful, almost childish, but inside were words she had written with serious intent. At the top of the page, she had titled it, "Things We'll Do When We Feel Stronger." The list wasn't about numbers or goals doctors set for them. It was about life. Road trips with the windows down, matching outfits just for fun, starting a cooking channel where mistakes were allowed, a comedy tour where they could laugh at everyday struggles instead of being ashamed of them. Tammy laughed when she read it, shaking her head like it was a fantasy. But later that day, when no one was watching, she quietly added one more line at the bottom of the page. Climb a hill without stopping. During early weigh-in episodes, viewers noticed tension between the sisters. What they didn't see was the quiet ritual that happened beforehand. In the parking lot, just before entering the clinic, Amy and Tammy bumped fists like athletes before a game. They made a pact. No matter what the scale said, they would not turn on each other on camera. Amy said it plainly. They would fight the problem, not each other. That sentence became their unspoken rule for the rest of the season. There was also a night no one planned to film. A power outage hit their neighborhood after a long day of production. With no television, no phones, and no distractions, the sisters sat on the porch for hours. A producer, standing far away, recorded only audio, not for broadcast, but for memory. They talked about childhood stories, favorite songs, and fears they rarely admitted out loud. Tammy confessed she was scared that if she changed too much, people wouldn't recognize her personality anymore. Amy answered without hesitation. "Growing doesn't erase you," she said. "It upgrades you." Another unseen moment happened during a grocery store shoot. While cameras focused on the sisters, Tammy noticed a young fan nervously watching from another aisle. Instead of continuing the scene, she rolled over, smiled, and started a conversation. She asked the child about their favorite snacks and how their day was going. The crew later said it was one of the most genuine moments of the season. It never aired. There simply wasn't time. Behind the scenes, the crew had their own way of staying motivated. They started a playful competition called Steps versus Snacks. Everyone tracked how many steps they took during filming days. If Amy and Tammy beat the crew's average, the crew had to perform a silly dance on camera. If the crew won, the sisters had to try a new healthy recipe on video. According to the unofficial scoreboard, Amy won 3 times. The camera operators were forced to do a choreographed wiggle in the driveway while laughing so hard they could barely stand. Midway through the season, motivation dropped. Filming was exhausting. Progress felt slow. That's when a field producer introduced something simple but powerful, a victory jar. Every small win went inside. Drinking more water, finishing an appointment, trying a new food, saying no when it mattered. By the final week of filming, the jar overflowed. When they opened it and read the slips out loud, even the crew went quiet. The room filled with something heavier than silence.
Pride.
One of the biggest moments, never meant for television, happened on the last scheduled recording day. After interviews ended and microphones were removed, Tammy asked the crew to wait. She wanted one more take, not for the show, but for herself. She stood in front of an unused camera and spoke directly to the future. She said she hoped that if she ever watched that clip, she would see proof that she kept going. The tape was saved privately, never aired. Viewers thought the season was about numbers and milestones. What they never saw was the story underneath, the quiet resilience, the laughter during rough days, the promises made when no one was watching, the courage to keep choosing progress again and again. As filming wrapped, Tammy's life shifted again in a way cameras struggled to capture. The care facility never truly slept. Even at night, there were footsteps in the hallways, distant laughter from nurses, the constant hum of machines. Tammy sat by the lounge window one evening, watching parking lot lights blur through the fog. Caleb rolled up beside her, holding 2 cups of sugar-free hot cocoa like they were priceless treasures. Being married inside a medical facility felt strange. Romantic in theory, complicated in reality. Cameras in hallways, staff check-ins, schedules that belonged to everyone but them. Privacy felt like something other people had, something rare and expensive. They joked about it, but the truth lingered between them. Caleb admitted he wished they had one space that was truly theirs.
No charts. No interruptions.
Tammy understood. She said privacy wasn't just about walls or locked doors. It was about being able to speak freely without judgment. And in that sense, she realized they were already rich. The next afternoon, they decided to be creative. They signed up for gardening hour at the far end of the facility courtyard, a place most residents avoided. The greenhouse was warm, quiet, and smelled like earth and tomato leaves.
No cameras. No interruptions.
Just them. They planted herbs together, laughed too loudly, and talked about life beyond the facility. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. When a nurse eventually found them and reminded them about dinner, neither felt annoyed. They felt content. That night, Tammy lifted her cocoa cup like a toast to creative dates, greenhouse honeymoons, and building a life even when walls were shared. And somewhere between laughter, honesty, and quiet determination, the sisters kept proving something viewers were only beginning to understand. The real story wasn't what aired on television. It was what survived when the camera stopped. The morning light crept softly through the thin curtains of the care facility, painting faint patterns across the floor as Tammy woke to the sound of distant carts rolling down the hallway. The building stirred slowly, like it always did, but something felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just steadier. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much her life had changed without her fully noticing when it happened. Marriage had not arrived the way she once imagined. There were no private hotel rooms, no long drives into the unknown, no doors to shut the world out. Instead, There were shared schedules, staff checklists, and conversations interrupted by routine care. But within all of that, there was something unexpectedly solid.
Partnership.
The kind that didn't need perfect conditions to survive. Caleb met her later in the lounge, smiling like he always did, as if choosing joy were a daily decision rather than a mood. They talked about nothing important at first. Breakfast, the weather, a documentary they wanted to finish. But underneath the small talk lived bigger thoughts. Leaving the facility one day, facing the world without safety nets, learning how to carry discipline into freedom. Tammy admitted she was afraid of failing once no one was watching. Caleb didn't rush to fix that fear. He simply reminded her that discipline wasn't something you lost when you left a place. It was something you practiced until it belonged to you. She held on to that thought longer than she expected. Back home, Amy moved through her kitchen with practiced familiarity, her son's laughter trailing behind her like music. Life felt fuller now. Not easier, but fuller. She had learned that love didn't always arrive packaged neatly. Sometimes it came with discomfort, with difficult conversations, with moments that forced you to choose honesty over silence. Brian continued to show up in ways that mattered. Not perfectly, not always confidently, but consistently. Amy noticed the change not in big gestures, but in the small ones. The way he listened, the way he bent down to meet her son at eye level, the way the house felt calmer, warmer, more grounded. Online, fans debated, analyzed, and speculated. They always did. But Amy no longer felt the same need to explain herself to everyone. She had shared what she needed to share. The rest belonged to her family. Privacy, she learned, didn't mean secrecy. It meant boundaries. As weeks turned into months, the noise around the sisters never fully faded. Fame has a way of following you into rooms you wish it wouldn't. But both Amy and Tammy had learned something valuable. They didn't owe perfection to anyone. Progress was enough. They talked often now, not just about health or filming schedules, but about who they were becoming. Tammy admitted she liked this version of herself more. Not because she was smaller or stronger, but because she trusted herself more. Amy admitted she was still learning how to balance motherhood, love, and self-respect. Neither pretended to have all the answers. There was a quiet evening not long after when the sisters sat together without cameras, without plans, without expectations. The room was dim, lit only by a lamp in the corner. Tammy joked that silence used to scare her. Amy said it still did sometimes. They laughed softly at that. What viewers had seen over the years were dramatic arcs, emotional breakdowns, and triumphant moments framed neatly for television. What they hadn't seen was the real work, the choosing again and again to try, the forgiveness that didn't happen overnight, the courage it took to face themselves without the safety of edits and music. Tammy thought back to the message she recorded for her future self. She hoped that version of her was still moving forward, even if slowly. Amy looked at her son sleeping peacefully and understood that life would always be a mixture of chaos and calm. And Brian, standing quietly in the doorway, realized that being present mattered more than being perfect. The story of the Slaton sisters was never really about weight. It was about survival, about learning how to love without losing yourself, about growth that happened when no one was clapping, and about building something real in a world that often rewards appearances over effort. Some days were still hard. Some conversations were still uncomfortable. But there were also mornings filled with light, laughter in kitchens, and quiet victories no one posted about. Those were the moments that lasted. And as the world continued to watch, comment, and speculate, the sisters kept living.
One honest day at a time.